One Piece has always been a story about dreams. But dreams in One Piece are never free. Every era of piracy was built on sacrifice. Joy Boy failed centuries ago. Odin died protecting the future. Whitebeard gave his life for the next generation. And Roger smiled as he walked toward his own execution because he understood something terrifying. Inherited will can only exist when somebody is left behind to carry it forward. That's the true tragedy of One Piece. Every great era begins with someone dying for the future. And now, as the final saga approaches, one terrifying question becomes impossible to ignore. When the Straw Hats finally reach the end of the Grand Line, will all of them survive it? Because for years, fans have treated the Straw Hats like untouchable characters. But the final war is different. This isn't Alabasta, or Enies Lobby, or Dressrosa. For the first time in the series, the Straw Hats are entering a war where escaping may no longer be possible. The world government, Emu, Blackbeard, the ancient weapons, the Void Century, and when stories reach their ending, sacrifices become unavoidable. So today, we're ranking every Straw Hat from least likely to most likely to die before the end of One Piece. Not based on power, not based on popularity, and not based on who fans love the most, but based on sacrifice themes, foreshadowing, and the way Oda writes his characters. Because when you truly analyze the Straw Hats through the lens of storytelling, some of them feel strangely safe, but others feel like Oda has quietly been preparing them for tragedy from the very beginning. Starting with the least likely, Nami. Nami's dream is directly connected to the end of the journey itself. She wants to map the entire world, not part of it, not a single sea, the entire world. Killing Nami before the journey ends would leave her dream permanently incomplete in a way that doesn't really serve the story emotionally. But beyond that, Nami represents something incredibly important within the Straw Hats: home. Whenever the crew becomes emotionally unstable, Nami often becomes the emotional center holding everyone together. Even visually, Oda constantly places her in scenes that feel warm, comforting, and human. Her role in the story feels much more connected to survival and rebuilding the world after the final war ends. Then there's Franky. Franky's dream is tied directly to the Thousand Sunny reaching the end of the world. The Sunny isn't just a ship anymore. It's Franky's masterpiece, his legacy, the ship carrying the future Pirate King himself. And Franky feels more like the creator who survives long enough to witness the impossible become reality. Even his personality supports that. Franky carries emotional depth, but not tragic inevitability. He doesn't feel like a character Oda is secretly preparing for sacrifice. Robin is next. And honestly, Robin may actually be one of the safest Straw Hats, because Robin's role goes far beyond simply being a crew member. She carries Ohara's will, the poneglyphs, the truth of the Void Century, the history the world government erased for 800 years. Robin isn't just important to the Straw Hats anymore. She's essential to the entire ending of One Piece itself. Killing Robin before the world learns the truth would feel incomplete, especially after spending her entire life searching for answers. Robin surviving long enough to finally reveal the truth to the world feels almost guaranteed. Then comes Chopper. At first glance, Chopper feels completely safe. But hidden beneath his innocent personality is actually one of the saddest possibilities in the crew. Because Chopper's dream is impossible, he wants to cure every disease. And in a story entering its final war, that dream becomes terrifying. Because Oda could absolutely create a scenario where Chopper sacrifices himself trying to save others, especially considering how emotionally attached Chopper is to protecting human life. But even then, the probability still feels low overall. The story still treats Chopper as one of the emotional lights of the crew. Now things become more dangerous. Sanji. Sanji has always carried self-sacrificial tendencies, and not just occasionally, constantly. Thriller Bark, Whole Cake Island, Wano. Again and again, Sanji places everyone else above himself. Deep down, Sanji still struggles with self-worth. That's why moments like "I needed a light" during Enies Lobby hit so hard emotionally. Because Sanji is someone who believes his purpose is protecting others before himself. And that mentality becomes extremely dangerous during Final Wars. But despite all that, Sanji's narrative still feels incomplete. The all blue, his freedom, a future where he can finally live happily without guilt. Oda usually rewards characters who suffered the most emotionally, which is why Sanji probably survives. Then we reach Zoro. And honestly, Zoro may have the most legendary death potential in the entire crew. Think about how perfectly it fits his character. A swordsman dying while protecting his captain. A warrior remaining standing even after death itself. A final moment mirroring Ryuma and legendary samurai myths. It feels almost poetic, especially because Zoro's loyalty to Luffy stopped being normal friendship long ago. Luffy becoming Pirate King became Zoro's dream too. That's why scenes like Nothing Happened remain so iconic. Because Zoro already proved he would throw away his life without hesitation if it meant protecting Luffy's future. And if the final war reaches a moment where Luffy's life hangs in the balance, Zoro sacrificing himself would feel terrifyingly believable. But there's one reason he probably survives. Zoro deserves to witness Luffy becoming Pirate King with his own eyes. That payoff feels too important to remove. Then comes Brook, and Brook is secretly one of the darkest possibilities in the entire story. Because unlike everyone else, Brook already experienced death once. He already watched his entire crew disappear, already drifted alone for decades, already experienced loneliness beyond imagination. And the only thing keeping him alive emotionally was Laboon. That promise carried Brook through hell itself. But once Brook reunites with Laboon, what happens after that? Brook's story becomes complete, and that's what makes him terrifying. Because One Piece constantly hides Brook's tragedy behind jokes. But beneath the skeleton puns and music, Brook may actually be one of the saddest characters Oda ever created. A second death after fulfilling his final promise could become one of the most emotional moments in the entire series, especially because Brook himself already accepts death in a strangely peaceful way. Then we reach Jinbei. And honestly, Jinbei feels like someone who accepted death a very long time ago. Think about Marineford. Think about him standing in front of Akainu. Think about Whole Cake Island. Again and again, Jinbei throws himself into impossible danger without hesitation if it means protecting Luffy. Because Jinbei represents something unique within the Straw Hats. He represents the old generation entrusting the future to the new. And characters like that are extremely dangerous. Mentors, guardians, protectors. They're often the ones who sacrifice themselves so the future can survive. But there's another reason Jinbei feels vulnerable. He represents the bridge between fishmen and humans. If Jinbei dies during the final war, protecting both races, his death could symbolize unity itself. And honestly, that feels exactly like the kind of emotional tragedy Oda would write. But even Jinbei isn't number one, because then we arrive at Luffy. And yes, Luffy absolutely has death foreshadowing surrounding him. His lifespan has already been shortened multiple times. Ivankov warned him. Gear transformations constantly destroy his body. And his parallels to Roger become stronger with every arc. Even their smiles feel identical. Narratively, Luffy dying after achieving true freedom would mirror Roger perfectly. A pirate king whose death inspires the entire next generation. A man who changes the world, then leaves it smiling. And honestly, that possibility feels terrifyingly real, especially because One Piece constantly reminds us that freedom always comes with sacrifice. But despite all that, One Piece still fundamentally feels like a story where Luffy survives long enough to finally enjoy the freedom he chased his entire life, which leaves only one Straw Hat remaining, Usopp, the Straw Hat most likely to die before the end of One Piece. And the terrifying part is, it makes perfect narrative sense, because Usopp's dream is fundamentally different from everyone else's. He doesn't want to become stronger than everyone. He doesn't want treasure, or fame, or power. Usopp wants to become a brave warrior of the sea. And maybe that dream was always darker than it sounded. Because ever since Little Garden, Usopp admired the giants of Elbaf for one reason above all else. They smiled in the face of death. Dory and Brogy spent 100 years fighting, knowing either one of them could die at any moment. And Usopp saw that as true bravery. And bravery only exists when fear exists. Because bravery means nothing to someone who is never afraid in the first place. That's what makes Usopp special. Every Straw Hat charges into danger naturally, but Usopp is terrified almost every single time, and yet he still stands beside them anyway. That's real courage, and Oda has quietly reinforced that idea for years. Back in Alabasta, Usopp once said, "There are moments when a man cannot run from a fight, even if it means dying." Looking back now, that line feels less like bravery and more like foreshadowing. And now, everything points toward Elbaf, the island Usopp dreamed about since Little Garden, the land of giants, warriors, legends. But something strange appears in the recent final saga opening. While the Straw Hats continue moving forward, Usopp is shown staying behind in Elbaf, alone. Almost like Oda is quietly separating him from the crew before the final war even begins. And honestly, it makes perfect sense. Because Elbaf isn't just another island for Usopp, it's the place connected to his dream itself. Even Dressrosa felt strangely symbolic. Oda turned the weakest Straw Hat into God Usopp, almost like his journey was never about becoming physically powerful, but becoming legendary through courage itself. Imagine the final war reaching Elbaf, the battlefield collapsing, giants falling one after another, the Straw Hats cornered against impossible odds. And while the giants of Elbaf retreat in fear, the weakest Straw Hat in the world stays behind alone. Usopp, terrified, shaking, knowing he can't win, and this time, nobody would come save him. But standing anyway. For the first time in his life, Usopp wouldn't lie about being brave. Maybe becoming a brave warrior of the sea was never about surviving. Maybe it was about standing tall, even when death was certain. And maybe that's the real tragedy of One Piece. The Straw Hats were never just chasing dreams. They were carrying the future of an entire world on their backs. And when the final war finally begins, some of them may never sail together again. But honestly, if one Straw Hat truly had to die before the end, Usopp becoming a brave warrior of the sea through one final stand might become the most unforgettable moment in One Piece history. Because sometimes the bravest people aren't the ones who feel no fear. They're the ones who stand and fight, even when they're terrified. And that's exactly who Usopp has always been.